Hey everyone, Josh Frantz. I'm the lead security consultant at Rapid7. Been with Rapid7 for a little over 2 years now, mostly helping our customers integrate other security products with our own. So you may have heard of things like Metasploit, Insight VM, Insight IDR, Insight AppSec. All that stuff I'm intimately familiar with, especially working with APIs between products, especially in AWS and other cloud environments, but specifically with AWS. So the agenda for this talk is fairly straightforward. I'm a pretty minimalist person, so you'll notice that in the slides that I'm presenting. It really is minimal. So migrating to AWS, a lot of the customers that I help with are coming from an on-prem environment where they're trying to swap over to AWS, either through a lift and shift or migrating some apps, some software over, things like that. How do you migrate something with security in mind is a big important thing that everybody thinks about when they're doing things like this. The old philosophy, guardrails, not roadblocks, and we'll talk a little bit about how we should enable developers to push code safely and not try to impede their ability to ship product, because in the end, every company, regardless of if you know it or not, is probably a product company. You may be selling a promise, you may be selling software, but in the end, you are selling a product. And then common pitfalls that I've seen in the past with different customers and how they embrace moving to AWS and how they shift their environment or start afresh. Because that's a lot of times what customers will see is they'll say, hey, we have this ability to move to a cloud environment. Maybe we can get like a fresh start. We'll buy all new tools, and it really doesn't need to work that way. And a lot of customers kind of think that. So in migrating to AWS, there is a lot of overlap between roles, right? So I have this cool table. It's a little bit of a hyperbolic table, but I like it, where we have roles for different pieces of IT. You have infrastructure, standing servers up, things like that. Networking, how do we make these servers connect from one end to another? And then security, like who handles the securing, the baselining of those systems, on-prem, in the cloud. We see those roles transition from traditional system engineers to software developers. Really, when you think about infrastructure as code, the paradigm shift from everything as code, networking, software, infrastructure, security as code. So when you think of things like infrastructure, you think of Terraform, where now there are tons of like open source tools that help you do security and compliance checks and module packs for Terraform to make sure that you don't have a security group that allows access to ports that you wouldn't like to see. The same thing with networking, how can we align better with networking teams as security functions, as software developers, and kind of shift that, model to the left from a networking perspective. And then with security, security engineering and software developer, I think that's funny because really security should be embedded in all your processes. And we like to say that, as companies, me working at Rapid7, we are a security product company, so we want you to embed those practices in everything that you do. But a lot of the times we say that, but it's easier as a software developer, and I'm sure no one here is guilty of this, of ignoring security controls. So me in security, are sometimes viewed as like a burden. Like we're always in your face saying, no, you can't push that, you can't do that. Where we should have better relationships with software engineers, IT people, network engineers in general, and that's kind of my job, is bridging that gap, making it easier so that we can push code safer, faster, without hindering the ability to push that into production. And it's not like I'm saying that, if you're moving on-prem to AWS, your job's gone. That's not what this table is meant to do. It's that we should kind of embrace that builder mindset. If you're a network engineer or a software developer or a security engineer, you need to kind of embrace the other things that are happening in the other business units, or you're going to become, I don't want to say irrelevant because that's even more hyperbolic, but hard to stay employed with the paradigm shift in cloud that's been not only happening, but has happened. So security in mind. I'm a security person. I write code for customers. I build those integrations between security products. So I've seen kind of, everybody's seen like both sides of the coin. But I'm sure all of you have heard about a breach, in the last 10 minutes. I don't even have a watch on, but I just know in the last 10 minutes there's probably been a data breach somewhere. And this Gartner has this, through 2020, 95% of cloud security failures would be the customer's fault. I can't think of a breach that has been a cloud provider's fault in recent memory, but I can just tell you that misconfigurations, I don't know if it's a misnomer, but maybe a misconception that breaches like, misconfiguration, those are brand new. Like, oh my God, we're breaking barriers down. We have new security vulnerabilities. I want to introduce you to a misconfiguration called any on a firewall that's been around since before I was born. That was a misconfiguration. So it's nothing new. When you don't have everything automated, like, if anybody talks to me for more than 5 minutes, I want to automate everything. I do plan on automating myself out of a job so I can go live in Texas and hang out with my kid and my wife and like fishing every day. But that's not going to happen anytime soon, fortunately, maybe. But the more we look at this quote, the more interesting it becomes to me that we're shifting from, oh man, they left Flash installed and they haven't updated it in 6 months. Like, they're going to get popped soon. Oh, this remote code executable exploit is available, and I can manipulate that from my home computer and be a jerk to a corporation, a million miles away. The paradigm really shifts to like, oh, wow, we actually left this bucket open to the public, or oh wow, all of our EBS snapshots are stored and they're publicly accessible. So it really is a paradigm shift, and people don't think about that. And when you migrate, security is the focus, right? You want to do so securely, and you don't want to maybe migrate everything right away. Companies, it may shock you, but companies actually think that they actually can like move everything one for one, not piece it together, but actually just like move it in one fell swoop. And that's just not how it works securely. And like I said, this quote is kind of perfect in that the shared responsibility model is such a key thing, right? Like, it really falls by the wayside. Another thing that really falls by the wayside is the principle of least privilege. If you go into your IAM policies and just check and do a Control F and find quote star quote, and just find all your policies that kind of allow access to a bunch of resources and permissions and things like that, often enough, it's a lot more than you probably realize. So when you shift everything from on-premise, where you're probably not using source control for everything, try to keep that in mind as you migrate to the cloud, that source control is your friend, and you probably want to use that. It allows for additional eyes to be on everything and make sure that everything goes through like a proper code review. So guardrails, not roadblocks. As demonstrated on the right, roadblocks are not effective in migration efforts. When I had first had someone look at the slide, they were like, I don't understand, like there's nothing blocking the way. And most of the time, as a developer or a network engineer, when I have a giant no crossing sign or don't go, this is how it looks for me. There's nothing in my way because I'm just ignoring what you're doing. So this is actually not an error. I did this on purpose because roadblocks are normally not effective. People will just find ways around them, as you can all probably relate to. You can put as many controls as you want in place. Someone somewhere is going to find a way around it. I have been in situations where I'm working with a customer with hundreds of AWS accounts, and we found out after some very, very deep investigative forensic, actually me having them talk to their TAM at AWS and say, hey, have you had any accounts created with email addresses here that aren't in like our organization? Well, yes, they spun this up with a corporate credit card. So that you like have these people going rogue inside their own environment, creating these AWS accounts. So how do you stop things like that? Well, the person was very mad that they had to go through like a security review before their application was allowed in production in their account, and they didn't like that. They saw it as a way you're impeding them from pushing code, just like I talked about earlier. And it happens like that. That's not the only case I've heard of that. And it's just going to get worse the more we think about, how do we effectively partner with developers specifically, or network engineers, or anybody in IT? It starts with, you don't tell someone they can't do something. Well, some situations you might have to. But partnering them better from the start, and like I said, shifting left is something like, buzzword, meme, you pick what you want to call that, but it actually is like a culture shift for most organizations, especially when they're going from an on-prem environment to something cloud-based, where it is a lot different. It's not just, I hear a lot of people referencing the cloud as someone else's computer. I actually like to think of it more as like a giant airship. Like, it's not a vehicle, but it's actually something flying in the sky, because it's constantly moving, it's constantly evolving. I mean, all of you have heard the announcements at re:Invent. I still don't know them all. I don't think I will for probably another couple of months until one of my customers says, hey, Josh, can we implement this with one of your products? I'm like, I don't really know what that is, but sure. So yeah, it's very important that we partner with developers early in the life cycle of software development, especially when, and it's not just software development anymore, it's everything, because software engineers, when just think of the Terraform example, all of your networking being set up, your load balancing, your security groups, all of your VPC rules are set up with developers in code, and they can be. And then just talking about some of the common pitfalls, I kind of alluded to this earlier that I see with customers. It's not funny, but weird sometimes, where customers, again, think that they can migrate everything in like one day. They think it's going to be a very easy shift, and it really isn't. And some of your faces are like, how can you like not think it's going to be hard? It's not going to be that easy, right? And a lot of customers that I work with really do think it's going to be that easy, and it's not. So some of the common pitfalls I see is we're making the same mistakes on-prem, and we're continuing to make those mistakes in the cloud. So one very easy example that I can talk about all the time is like patch management, right? Like patch management seems so easy. Like I have a system, it has outdated software, I use something like SCCM in a Windows environment or some state config tool like Puppet, whatever. I've seen weirder stuff, group policy to push stuff in Windows, whatever. And you just push a software update and it's done. And it's very easy. Like how is that a problem anywhere? Like when I first got into security and I heard about this like problem with patch management, it's like, what? Like let me just write a script quick and I'll push a patch out. Only to find out that, yeah, well, if you update that, it actually breaks our app, which makes millions of dollars. And thank God I never did that. But yeah, that's a thing that I never understood. And patch management, let's just take an EC2 instance, for example. Well, why can't we just have one image that everybody uses and we update it, every day and we apply all the patches and everything's cool and they build on that? And that's something that a lot of organizations don't consider when they make that migration. It's, how do we enforce, secure defaults in EC2 images when we're rolling them out to our environments? So that's one common pitfall I see is we're still making the mistakes of, hey, we're not going to update this image for 6 months on end, and then you get popped by some, again, remote vulnerability, and you aren't using a tool like Insight VM to detect those vulnerabilities. That's something that I see all the time. Another thing, too, is organizationally within AWS, a lot of the times they're like using one account for everything, and that has just not been the case for a long time with AWS, where you're supposed to use one account for everything and have all of these rules aligned with one account. It should really be like multiple accounts within an organization. And I know that AWS in the last couple of years have changed a lot with what they're doing with organizations, but customers, companies are not doing that still. They're not segmenting things out, reducing the blast radiuses among their applications. For the most part, I think that an account per application is fairly standard now to say in terms of like best practices. So definitely, that's a common pitfall I see as well. Stepping in bubble gum in your shoe when you're walking in the door to work, that's a pitfall, potentially. Not cloud related, unless the gum fell from the sky. But I like this picture. Another common pitfall I see all the time is, for some reason, people have this idea that we're starting new in the cloud. We have to buy all new tools. Let's invest millions of dollars into these new tools because we're starting all fresh. We don't need any on-prem legacy stuff. And it's just kind of like a waste of money, for one. I mean, just thinking about it, to the uneducated business mind of myself, is why would I waste money on millions of dollars on tools when I have something that works on-prem? Like, can it translate to the cloud? And most of the time it is. I mean, when I think about our product, just Rapid7 products, because I work at Rapid7, all of them like kind of seamlessly work together with the cloud. It's the language is a little different in how you secure them, how you gain access to them is a little different, but it's definitely something that's doable. And a lot of customers, I kind of have to talk off the ledge and like, hey, it would be cool, yeah, if you bought like a new secrets management tool, but like, can't you keep using CyberArk, or can't you keep using HashiCorp Vault? Like, why can't you just do that? And I think and that kind of leads me to the next pitfall, is people think that products can't work together, and you might have to do some, in-house work to make them work together. And, like our company, our products have a lot of integrations naturally with other products, and they don't think about how they could synergize those tools together when they buy them, which is kind of like falls by the wayside, and I don't understand why. So that's just another common pitfall I see with like migrating to the cloud from like an on-prem, not necessarily old school mentality, but maybe someone or a company who is becoming more rare now that you have a company that has nothing in the cloud versus everything on-prem. So yeah, that's another pitfall that I see a lot of the time when it comes to migrating. And then again, I brought up version control before. That is very important. I know companies that have all of their IAM policies that aren't managed by AWS in version control. They're constantly being checked. I, at one point, had every AWS policy in GitHub, and I know a lot of other developers do this too. So like when AWS makes a change to a managed policy, I'll have like the old version in source control just so I can see like what's changed. And I know that AWS has like a lot of legacy policies, and they'll tell you like if you go to IAM and use the GUI, they'll tell you like this policy's been deprecated and you're still using it. So I know at one point I still do like automatically pull down all the managed policies and like compare them. But version control for IAM policies, version control for everything really is like my philosophy on it. And I know from on-prem, like maybe that's not the case because you didn't have the ability to, there might be a number of reasons why you didn't have it, but source control is your friend, and it definitely makes things easier, especially like when you're working with this stuff like every day. So yeah. Thanks everyone for attending this talk. Hopefully it hit on a few things like common misconceptions and ways we can partner together with other teams, like in not only in security, but in IT in general, infrastructure, networking, that kind of thing, because the lines are kind of becoming more blurred together every day. And I say to my boss all the time, we always joke, it's like, I'm not a software developer, you know, I'm a security person, but he's like, well, like, what does a software developer do? And I'm like, well, they write code. It's like, yeah, Josh, you might be a software developer now. So yeah, thanks for attending. If anyone wants to hit me up on Twitter or email, otherwise, our booth in the expo hall, Rapid 7, feel free to stop by. Yeah, we'll be there. So, yeah, what? 347 in 3407 in the expo hall. Please stop by. We might have pens or something. That person in front, Mandy, she'll make sure you get a pen. But yeah, everybody, thanks for attending. Any questions, feel free to hit me up.